Welcome to Lawyerpreneur, where we discuss the alternate paths that allow lawyers to engage their entrepreneurialism and distinguish themselves from others, because being a lawyer doesn't have to mean doing business as usual. I'm your host, Jeremy Richter. Today's episode is brought to you by Alps Insurance, the nation's largest direct writer of lawyers' malpractice insurance. Founded for lawyers by lawyers over 30 years ago, Alps works directly with your firm, no broker or agent, and if you do have a claim, the Alps claims handling team is comprised of actual attorneys, all with private experience. Alps roots for the law firms they protect. They believe in your success and nurture your endeavors with industry-leading coverage, risk management resources, and accredited CLEs, offering practical advice for pioneering lawyers like you. And Alps has the slickest online application out there. Qualifying firms can apply, see rates, and bind coverage in about 20 minutes. Right now, you can get 25% off one CLE seminar from Alps. Go to alpsinsurance.com/CLE. That's ALPS insurance.com/CLE and use the promo code Lawyerpreneur upon checkout. In addition to the corporate sponsorship that helps pay for the hosting and transcription of the show, you can support Lawyerpreneur on Patreon at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. For less than the cost of a .1, you can help pay for the time it takes in creating and editing Lawyerpreneur and receive copies of my two most recent books, Stop Putting Out Fires and Level Up Your Law Practice. Now, on to the interview. My guest today is Barbara Hinske. She is a former corporate contracts lawyer who now writes novels for a living. Her longest running series is the Rosemont series, and her book, The Christmas Club, was turned into a movie for the Hallmark channel. Barb, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, Jeremy. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Well, great, and I'm really excited about it. Tell me about corporate contracts law, because I am all litigation all the time, and so that seems very much like a foreign world to me.
Well, so I have been an in-house, either a banking lawyer at a private law firm, and then moved in-house with a lender, and then finally went in-house with a title insurance company. So I'm basically an unglamorous dirt lawyer who had an in-house career for probably most of my 30 years almost of my legal career was in-house, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the business focus of it, which kind of matched my own innate business interest. And like probably most of the people on this podcast, whether they're creative or doing other business interests, most of us lawyers have an itch to do something, to run something on our own. And I certainly did.
So during your legal career, were you doing any writing? Were you doing other stuff alongside of it, or was it all law all the time for you?
No, well, at one point in time, I did have a brief hiatus where my late husband and I purchased and ran a vending machine company. So I had 3 years away, and then for his deteriorating health, and we needed better insurance, I went back to work as a lawyer and in-house at a lender. That continued until 2010 when I broke my neck in a car accident. Had double vision for months and months, and still have some of it on occasion when I'm tired. At any rate, when I was recuperating, in the neck brace and all of that, couldn't read, couldn't watch TV. And at that point, I just conceived of the plot line for my Rosemont series. So I started writing. Then I got my first book out. I'm self-published in print and ebook, traditionally published in audio, but self-published in print and ebook. Got my first book out in December of 2012, and then continued to work a full-time legal job until 2019, when I finally hung it all up and decided that, it was really fine. I really could write full-time and support myself.
That's really cool. Well, I mean, not about breaking your neck. That's not cool.
No.
But during that period, that kind of reminds me of, there's an author, Barry J. Hutchinson, who writes a lot of books, but he's written a series called Space Team. And it's a space comedy. It's like Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide, kind of, that's the style. And I heard him tell a story about his mother was very ill, And so he was spending a lot of time in the hospital, just, nothing to do. You're just in the hospital room there. And
Yeah.
she was ill. And he conceived of this first novel. And he just came up with these characters. They're all a bizarre cast of characters. And the novel or the whole series really created itself from there. And so when you were telling that about breaking your neck, and then during the recovery period on these walks, you came up with this idea that just really reminded me of that. Were you looking for a writing idea, or is it something that like you had all this time that you hadn't had before and it came to you?
Kind of a little of both. My undergraduate was engineering. So I was an industrial engineer before I went to law school. So I was not much of a writer when I became a lawyer. In fact, I worked for a big firm, and they hired the dean of the local law school to give private writing sessions to two of us. And the other guy was too proud and didn't think he needed it. But I thought, well, what the hell, you want to pay for it? Let's do it. So 2 years later, the law firm finally checked how much they had spent on this and said, oh, for crying out loud, enough. But that 2 years working with the dean of law school taught me how to write. And I became a pretty proficient technical writer. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool? To be a writer. And I always told bedtime stories to my kids, would make up stories, but never really thought I would do anything with it. When my father retired, he wrote whodunits. Never tried to get them published, but they were quite good. And I always thought, well, when I retire, I'll edit his stuff and then I'll see if we can get it published. But then when I broke my neck, I was damaged from the waist up, but not from the waist down. And I was bored out of my mind, no pain. So I walked about 3 hours a day. Wow. I would just go outside and walk. It was nice weather. I walked. And you know how walking fosters your creativity. So I was thinking about my dad's stuff, and I could almost hear his voice saying, Barb, come up with your own book. So I did. And then I turned to it. At that point in time, I was still practicing law, but as an in-house lawyer that had been in the same position for many years, I was in my zone of competency at work. It almost had a leisurely feel to it. And, I wasn't responsible for billable hours. I was just there to do my daily job. So I had a little extra time and energy to devote to it. My kids were in college. My youngest was in college when I started. So I had a little bit more time than I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at this young guy, and I'm like, oh, you probably don't have a lot of time.
Well, as it turns out, I, for the last several years, have prioritized getting up particularly early, and from between 5 and 5:30 until my oldest gets up, and it's usually 6:15. That's the time that I spend creatively. And sometimes that's on the podcast. Sometimes it's on the things that go into websites and blogging. But for the fall of 2020, so mid-August through, or maybe early August through December, I wrote my first novel.
And good for you.
Yeah, it was really exciting.
It's
the most fun that I have ever had. Or I guess ever had in writing. I guess I do need to qualify that.
Yeah.
It was difficult, but I've written 3 nonfiction books. And I'd stopped writing 2 other novels along the way, but this I was determined to do. And so I've said I'm going to self-publish it because I just really enjoy that entire process at this point. And the whole control over the whole thing. And I've talked about that at length here of why I do it. And so I've already set it up for pre-order and getting it ready. And I'm just really excited about that. And I've started on the sequel. And so, it is one of those things that you don't just, if you're looking to have time, you're not going to have it. You have to be very intentional about it.
Absolutely. I'm so proud of you for doing that. And as lawyers are good self-publishers because we're not put off by any of the business aspects. And I've made way more money self-published than I ever would have made if I had been traditionally published. And yes, I mean, I would get up at 4:30. And I would do the business aspect before I got ready for work at 6. And then I would write on the weekends. And I almost became a time hoarder. I'm a good time manager and always have been, but I would just really make sure I had blocks of time to work on the weekends. And at times they'd be like, you get an invitation to a baby shower or some family event. And you're like, oh, damn it. Well, I mean, that's pretty pathetic to resent the happy, joyous occasions of life that but it's hard to come up with the time. So
Yeah.
I salute you with that.
Well, thanks. I mean,
I can't wait till your book comes out. You need to make sure I know about what's the genre.
So it's dark fantasy. It's kind of verging on horror, but not quite horror, not quite that dark, but it gets there. And it's I don't think I've talked about this part on this podcast, but I wrote 3 scenes that were kind of short stories, but not probably long enough to really be a short story. Of just one came out of a dream that I had that was kind of bizarre. And then 2 of the other scenes came out of just interactions with my 6-year-old, who was, I guess, 5 at the time. And then after I wrote the 3rd one, I thought, you know what, I can tie all these things together and this can really be a cohesive story. And once I did that and realized, like, it kind of went from there in a way that nothing else that I had started writing fiction wise had done before. And so then one of my lawyer friends, who is a voracious reader and used to be an English teacher, she helped me develop it and edit it and provided a lot of critiques along the way and really made it a much better and more, it's a better project, and it has a lot more depth than I think it would have without her input. And so that was just hugely helpful and instrumental.
Well, this is so exciting. Yeah, I work with a developmental editor and, obviously line editors and proofreaders and all that. If you expect to be commercially successful, you got to get out of your own way and hire the same kinds of things that Random House and everybody else. And basically you almost hire the same people because they all moonlight. So
yeah. Well, let me ask you this, because I was listening to another interview of yours and I thought this was funny, that you said initially you wrote under a pen name, and tell us why you did that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I wrote under my maiden name, which is Hinske, because I thought, we all know that person that writes and thinks they're a great writer, and you read it and you go, oh my God, this is horrible. So I thought, I don't want to embarrass myself within the legal community if I really suck.
Yeah. Well, for similar reasons, I am writing under a pen name. I'm writing under the name J.W. Judge for my fiction, because with my litigation practice and it's all corporate clients, I don't want to get my legal wires and my fiction writing wires crossed. And when people go to, clients go to look me up, if they do a Google search, I want the business stuff to be what pops up and not the fiction stuff, which I'm also proud of, but those need to stay distinct.
I think that's wise, especially in today's world. It's nice to distance yourself a little bit and make sure that you're not so findable.
That's true. All right, one of the things that you just talked about is hiring the people that you need to hire to help make your product better, whether it's line editor, developmental editor. And I think it's really important, both for my writing, but also for my legal practice, to be able to listen to others who have expertise to make my practice better. You've already talked about how you learned legal writing better because of the law school dean that was hired. Was it easy for you to choose to hire experts and listen to them as you wrote? Or was that something that you found difficult to be able to put yourself in a position to do that?
No, I've always been, maybe that's a core strength, is that I know I can spot my limitations, and I'm good at hiring people to help me get around them. So that doesn't bother me. Not that I've taken all the advice I've ever paid for. There was one editor. I wrote 2 serial killer books. Most of my stuff is more women's fiction, uplifting, cozy, blah, blah. But I wrote 2 serial killer books, and one of the protagonists in Final Circuit has a botched cleft palate, and so she speaks in an odd way, and people discount her because of that, but she's brilliant. And so this major publisher person said, oh no, people won't like her disability, and they won't like the fact that, spoiler alert, she saves herself. They said, no, this genre wants the male love interest to come in and save her. And I'm like, oh, seriously? Are we in 2020 or 2018? Are we kidding? So I just said no and published it myself. It's been so well reviewed, and people love her character and love. So I do honor myself, but yeah. And now I'm writing a book right now. Just started it. I work with a writing coach who acts as the developmental editor. I spend plenty of money on that, probably $4,000, $4,500 a book until the first draft is done, but it saves time.
Yeah.
I don't have other plot arcs to then go back and weave in, which is very time consuming.
Well, I really like that you have written characters with disabilities, but who are not, that's not a crutch for them, and that they're
Right.
willing to put themselves in a position to be successful. I know that one of the books you've written recently, I want to make sure I get the title right, is Guiding Emily, and the main
Right.
character is blind. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about that book and some of the things you've been able to do for that community of people as a result of it,
Yeah.
because I think that that's such an important way to shed light on people with disabilities, but not focus on the limitations, but their opportunities.
Thank you for asking that. That book has my heart. Guiding Emily is the story of Garth, a guide dog, and Emily Main, his handler, who loses her eyesight on her honeymoon. And it's the story of their journey to find each other. And it's inspiring and uplifting and heartwarming, but it's also got some very hard, dark spots because she loses her eyesight on her honeymoon. So there's denial and depression and despair. I intersperse her journey with chapters from the guide dog's perspective. And Garth is all white, all light, all good, he's a black lab, but his spirit is all pure. So he's the all good character, and he's funny and lovable and quirky. So weaving that in makes the book not so heavy. I did a ton of research, including white cane training, and I went to Guide Dogs for the Blind and spent 3 days with them looking at their processes, because I wanted this book to be authentic, but not be, oh my God, poor blind girl, it sucks to be blind. Wildern, which is near my house. And I was just like so moved when I saw what they did. And I asked the development director giving me the tour what they needed. Well, 2 things. They're a nonprofit. They need money, of course. And he said, we need to raise awareness within the sighted community of the isolation that the blind feel. So I thought, well, great. I'm a novelist. I can do both. I can highlight issues and I can donate, which I have. I'm donating half my proceeds from the book to the foundation. So fast forward a little bit, now that this book has been out 6 months, I have had an overwhelmingly positive reception from the visually impaired community, who feel like it is honestly and honorably portrayed them. So as I'm starting the second book, and I'm like, okay, what do we need to accomplish with this book? And what I'm hoping to accomplish is to show this blind character as being such a talented problem solver. Unemployment is huge within the blind community, 74% unemployment rate. Can you imagine that? 74%. How do you build a life of accomplishment if you can't get a job. So I want to show her, I want to kind of counteract that, because as I've been watching and going around with people and becoming friends, these people adapt to change much better than any of the rest of us. They are critical thinkers and they are problem solvers. Their daily life has more problem solving than any of us get in a month. So I'm hoping to show that. I'm really excited about the plot arcs and I want it to be authentic, because I really want. I had a newly blind man reach out to me and say, and I've been talking to him. He's great. And he said, he's 40. He lost his eyesight less than a year ago, the same way my character did. And he said, your book gave me hope.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. I mean, if that doesn't leave you teary.
Yeah. I don't know what could be more fulfilling than that.
Yeah. I mean, I thought I did good stuff as a lawyer, and having people buy and sell properties and all that is real important, but it doesn't give people hope.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. I really appreciate and enjoy that you're donating those proceeds and writing for that cause and just providing that to the community. One of the things that I listened to in the other podcasts I listened to that I thought was really applicable to lawyers is you talked about how you networked your way to the Hallmark movie that was made from your book, The Christmas Club. And all of us, especially for outside counsel, but I know it's such an important part of in-house's job too, is networking and building your community. And a lot of times people put a broad net approach to networking, and it's not very fulfilling, and you're just doing what the people who came before you do and showed you how to do it, and maybe it doesn't work for you. But you networked with a specific purpose and achieved a very specific result. And I would love for you to tell that story.
Thank you. And I've done it twice now. It sounds so silly, but I decided I wrote a little Christmas novella, The Christmas Club, and early reviews were that it would be wonderful on the Hallmark Channel. And I didn't at that time, still don't watch a whole lot of the Hallmark Channel, but I knew that they were wholesome and heartwarming and did lots with Christmas movies. So I thought, well, how do I get to the Hallmark Channel? No idea. I started asking every single solitary person I knew. And I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, so I'm not near Kansas City or Irvine where they've got their headquarters. He said, do you know anybody at the Hallmark Channel? And people would look at me like I was crazy and say, well, no. Until somebody finally said, well, my neighbor at the cabin produces The Good Witch, which is their most successful franchise. You want me to give him a copy of your book? Well, yeah, run right over there now and give him a copy of The Christmas Club. And she did. Within 3 weeks, we were in negotiations to sell the screen rights. Holy cow. And not only did I sell the screen rights, they actually, a lot of authors optioned screen rights, but they actually made the movie. It aired for the first time December of 2019, or November of 2019 was the ratings hit that year. I'm proud of that. They played it in July. Well, they played it last March during pandemic. Hallmark ran them out. They run out their Christmas movies in July, and they did them again this year. So I've got 2 other things now under consideration for Hallmark, because once I was a Hallmark movie, and a lot of networks, over 117 outlets cover their countdown to Christmas, including the International Business Digest. I mean, who knew? So I contacted all of them, and 110 of them gave me guest blog posts, interviewed me, podcasts, whatever. I mean, I never got in the International Business Digest as an attorney, but let me write a Christmas movie. And that is just craziness. So once again, it's just keeping going. And with Guiding Emily, the screenwrites are in serious negotiations now. And I decided early on that I thought Emma Stone would be a good Emily, right? She's a Phoenix girl. So I asked everybody I knew, does anybody know Emma Stone's mother? Because I figure I'll get to her through her mother. For another reason, I won't. Anyway, I finally found somebody who said, yeah, put me in touch with, well, they knew her mother's best friend. I was in touch with mother's best friend, said, how do I get this to Emma Stone? She found out for me. Anonymous Content, which is a big deal, production company represents her or whatever. And by God, I went back and forth with them. They wanted outlines of book 2 and 3. Well, for Christ's sake, I had only finished book 1, but that's in your pajamas, no shower, no working on those 2 outlines, sent them off. And they loved it and said, they were going to present it to Emma. I haven't heard back. I assume it's no, but what?
But still.
I got an at bat. So that whole just asking everybody, crazy, but it kind of does work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you know what you want and you're willing to put in the work and persevere and risk rejection, which, for so many, I do not like rejection. And I know that most people don't. Like salespeople don't care because they get it all the time and they let it roll off their backs. But I have had to train myself that, rejection isn't rejecting me or my worth or my personal, like my well-being. It may be rejecting my proposal or, whatever. But putting yourself in that position to experience that is just, it's tough.
Well, sometimes you do get your feelings trampled on a little bit, but I don't know. I guess I am thin-skinned. I'm certainly not a coordinated athletic person. I was always the last kid to be picked for any sports team in school. And but I've always had this little rosy, optimistic bent to me. And I always believed it when the teachers would say they're saving the best for last, Barb. Well, they're saying, I'm like, yeah, I'm last because I'm the best. Well, eventually I realized that's not the case, but all right. So you don't like me. Well, everybody isn't gonna. Let's just move it along.
Well, another thing I like and this is related to the Hallmark story, is how prepared you were for opportunities that came on the back of that. You talked about having elevator pitches ready when you went to the set of the movie. Tell me about that, because I just think that speaks a lot to the same thing that I have to do of if I'm going to a conference where there are going to be clients or potential clients or whatever it is that I need to do, I always need to be ready and prepared to face an opportunity, or when I am going out of my way to create an opportunity. And so many times that can achieve a good result that if you hadn't put in that work ahead of time, you wouldn't have been able to accomplish something.
That's absolutely right. And it wasn't my original idea. I work with a life coach, have for over 10 years, and he suggested that when I went to Winnipeg and spent a week, my husband and I went, he was good enough sport to spend an entire week on location while they were filming The Christmas Club. They filmed those movies over 3 weeks, so we were there the middle week. And it was so much fun. Guys, if you ever get to do that kind of thing, go as a writer, because they treat you like a big cheese. It's just so fun. And it's so fun to see what they do, which is really a lot of hard work. But my business coach said, well, I have some pitches ready. I'm like, oh, duh, okay. And I practiced them in the mirror because I don't feel like I'm very good promoting myself flat-footed. Now, fortunately, my husband is one of those salespeople that you talked about, so he can sell anything to anybody at a moment's notice, and he's been very helpful. But for me, so I practiced my pitches in the mirror for the Rosemont series, for my serial killer books, and I spent a week talking to all of the producers because they all work independently. So now I've got direct contact with 3 producers and a director who all feed things in the industry to different people. So I've now got 4 people that I have their personal emails, their personal phone numbers that are very successful that I can pitch my stuff to directly. And I've worked hard to maintain those relationships too, since, the year and a half that I've been gone. And my first day on set, I met the producer that had brought my work to Hallmark, John Eskinas. had never met him, never even talked to him before.
Hmm.
The negotiations were all handled through our attorneys. And so he shook my hand and he said, Barb, we got to work together again. What else have you got? Well, thank God I just rolled that Rosemont series pitch out. So yes, that preparation of what you've got is so valuable. And I don't think comes naturally to most of us. It certainly doesn't to me.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, I'm not one of those people who can sell myself very well. I am willing and able to go to bat for other people and for my clients very easily, and will, pull out all the stops. But when it comes to doing that for me, I am super uncomfortable with it. And so it takes a lot of preparation and intentionality to do that sort of thing. So I can really identify with that. Another thing I want to ask you about, this is kind of the set of questions I want to close out with, is something you've talked about a couple of times today, is that you had a life coach for 10 years, you said.
Yeah.
Talked about having a writing coach. And it seems like, and you have invested money in your writing business and spent money to ensure your success, when I expect that early on, that was a risk. And
for sure.
So tell me about your willingness to put not just the time in, but the money behind it to help increase your likelihood of success.
Yeah, it does cost money. The people that come to me for advice to say that I don't have any money to spend on a proofreader or whatever, well, you know what? Unfortunately, it's like any product. You have to assure a certain quality level. In my books, I've sold just over 200,000 books since I've been writing. That's a mid-level success person. I would make far more than I would have because I'm self-published. But that doesn't happen without making sure that the covers and the interiors, everything is formatted. And early on, when I had just come out with my first book and had sold 12 copies to friends and family, I hired a prominent marketing firm to set me up with a blog tour and all kinds of stuff, paid them $4,500. They did everything that they said they would do in their contract, and it didn't sell one book. That was a good lesson to learn, because I realized, okay, some of these traditional approaches, just people are going to be willing to sell you all kinds of stuff, especially as authors. You see that. You get stuff in your inbox all the time. You have to be willing to say, okay, I don't think so, or realize, well, all right, so I shredded some cash. I mean, even as recently as 2019, my Hallmark movie is going to be on the Hallmark Channel with Cameron Matheson and Elizabeth Mitchell. So it was like a really star-studded cast for them. And for anybody, they had a dedicated webpage for my book. And I thought, well, I should run one of those banner ads for my book. What's got more congruence than the book to the movie, right? Same title for both. Contact the ad department. They're like, oh, how interesting. Nobody's asked us this before. We can, this is what we charge you. This is what you get, and send us your art. Well, I said, I don't have any art. It's just me. I don't know how to do this. So they took pity on me and designed the art. It was beautiful. It was so fun. That's another instance where just being nice and interactive with people, that personal connection gets you farther. But I don't think it was cost me $5,000. I didn't sell one book from that. Not one book. What I didn't realize was that Campbell's Soup had a green bean casserole product placement in the movie. So most of the bandwidth on that banner ad was taken up with cream of mushroom soup, green beans. Okay. So $5,000's a lot of money, but I rolled the dice. Seemed like a good business decision at the time. Turned out it wasn't. It's easier because I'm a lawyer and I had the money. It wasn't like it was going to be, I'm going to eat cat food if I lose this $5,000. And that's an advantage.
Sure.
We're all talking lawyers.
Yeah, and that's the group here is, so yeah, you're not missing a meal because you made those choices.
Right. And I honor and respect the people who are, but I spend about $400 to $4,500 on developmental editing and working with this writing coach to write the book, $1,500 for line editing, probably another $5 to $7 on proofreading, $250 to design the cover. So that's kind of what it cost me to put a book out.
And because you
70,000 words.
independently publish, so all of that is out of pocket, upfront, an investment.
Yeah.
And at this point, you have a track record. So you know what your expectations are for sales. And so it's an expectation,
Yes.
an investment that hopefully will pay off.
Hopefully will pay off. My Rosemont series is good. That keeps going. The 2 murder mysteries weren't real congruent with my audience, and they still haven't earned their keep, but I like them. I like having them out there. And you just never know. You don't make a whole heck of a lot selling screenwrites. People think you're on easy street. Not so. But it is a nice little kick of money. And this is crazy. I even licensed for $1,500 the right to the Missouri Department of Education to use 3 pages from Guiding Emily in their standardized testing for this spring.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
What the heck? Who knew? So
Well, that's
you never
really
know
cool.
where you're going to get a little spiff.
I like that. Well, I want to stop the interview there, but before we go, I want you to tell folks where they can find you, where they can follow you and keep up with your work.
Thank you. So my books are all on Amazon, exclusively on Amazon in print and ebook. It's in Kindle Unlimited. Most of them are on Audible. I'm at www.barbarahinske.com, and my email is bhinske@gmail.com. And I love to hear from people. I love to hear from my tribe as well. Most of us love being lawyers, but we love to do something else too. So,
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
thank you. This has been great.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please take time to rate and subscribe at whatever podcatcher you're listening on. And if you want more from me, you can find me at jeremywrichter.com. You can also find me on Twitter at RichterJW. And if you want the extra audio and benefits available at Patreon, you can become a patron at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. Thanks for listening.